An insurance company is trying to screw us out of a claim worth at least £40,000, and this is that story. So just a few months ago, we found out that somebody had totally and maliciously trashed our property top to bottom, inside out, causing to date at least £40,000 worth of damage. And lo and behold, the insurance company is trying to wriggle out of it, and you won't believe why. More about that in a minute. The people that did it were tenants at the property, but after many months of not paying the rent, owing thousands of pounds, claiming breathing space so we couldn't even talk to them about the outstanding debt, we couldn't take any action to evict them whilst the breathing space was in place, but eventually they did abandon the property and we found it in quite a state. More about that in another video, because that's going to take quite some time to put together because you won't quite believe the state of the property when we found it. More about that in another video. Back to the insurance company. Now, you won't believe either why it is that the insurance company is trying to wriggle out of this claim. Now, bearing in mind that the fundamental principle of the contract was to insure the building, the insurance company is saying that we didn't put the building on the contract, which is absolutely outrageous. Thus ensues complaints and arguments between us and the insurance company, part of which I've decided to share with you in this video. But I'm not naming the company just yet, and this is an ongoing situation, so it isn't entirely resolved. Because if they do decide to resolve it in our favour, it would only be fair to name them at that point because we will have reached the end of the story. But the point of the video is this: we know for a fact that we had several conversations via web chat, via phone calls about the policy because we'd renewed it for several years, including the building, I might add. But when the policy came to renewal the last time, there was a question over whether it included legal cover, because we always believed that it did, because being lawyers, we would include legal cover on an insurance policy. That's just a bit of a given. Bit of a tip and guidance, by the way, because £30 or £40 for an insurance policy to cover legal fees is quite the bargain. But anyway, that was the first thing that prompted a bit of a change, because they told us that we couldn't add legal cover onto a renewed policy. We had to quote a new policy and take out a new policy. So there was an extended conversation via web chat about this new policy to add legal cover to what was already in place. So we'd re-quoted the original cover with the legal cover on it, and for some reason was coming out cheaper. So we said we didn't want the renewal because it was more expensive, and we felt that they were being unfair because ostensibly they were quoting new policies cheaper than the renewal policies, which didn't quite seem fair. So we decided to go with a new policy with the legal cover on top. Fast forward to the point of the claim, notwithstanding that the loss adjuster went out and confirmed that he believed that it was all malicious damage and that we should be covered. This is what he said on site. The insurance company then said, well, the building's not covered, which we find absolutely outrageous because, as I said, that was the fundamental principle of the contract. Anyway, the point of this video is that I wanted to get hold of all of those web chats because they prove that we were talking about the cover, including the building, including the legal cover, because it was the same plus legal cover that we were quoting when we went for this new policy. And so at the same time as filing a complaint, we also filed a subject access request, which should have given us all of the communications between us and the company, all of the documents that they have, all of the phone calls where we've discussed our policy with them or they've discussed our policy internally, because that is inherently personal data, because if they're discussing us or our policy, it is inseparable from us and our policies. Therefore, they should disclose that data. But this is where it gets really interesting. So we'd filed that subject access request and waiting for the information. Lo and behold, we get some information back, but there's lots of bits missing. Some of the phone calls and fundamentally the web chats where we were discussing this very policy. So we've been back, I think they've responded 5 times now, and eventually they've provided us the transcripts of these web chats, which you can probably guess back up exactly what we said in the first place, which was that we were wanting to renew the cover with the legal cover intact, and were told that we had to cancel it and take out a new one and add legal cover to it, which is what we did. But it's even more interesting than that, because in one of the previous responses, the insurance company said, and I quote, they could not locate these web chats when they looked through the files. Bearing in mind this is the data protection team or data rights team or whatever they call themselves, who are supposed to look after your rights under the Data Protection Act and UK GDPR, which gives you the right of access to all of the data that they hold on you. They said they could not locate these web chats, which is strange because when the complaint came back as rejected, the complaint referred to these web chats and said, I can see that you said on this web chat X, Y, and Z. To which we then said, well, if you're referring to the web chat when declining the complaint, you should at least disclose the web chat to us. That's a breach of data protection GDPR right there, because they should have disclosed these web chats in the first place. Anyway, a few emails later, and they did disclose those web chats. And as you can probably guess, they back up everything that we said. Because we wanted to renew the policy and add legal cover, they wouldn't let us. They told us that we had to cancel it and take out a new one and add legal cover to it. And they are saying that in that interim, it didn't include the building, which is frankly utterly ridiculous. And it gets even more interesting than that with regard to the phone call. But more about that in a minute after I tell you something to protect your personal data. Now, just as an aside, regardless of the video topic that I'm talking about, I'm very often talking about companies that will hold your personal data. That might be your name, your address, your date of birth, your payment details, your bank details, relatives, next of kin, your first pet, your first teacher at school, your favorite place to go to, memorable color, memorable place, all of these kind of things. Now, when you sign up with these companies, you hand over all of this information. Now, as a lawyer, I would recommend that you take proactive steps to limit the number of companies that have your data on file and who may sell it on to third parties. That's why I partner with Incogni on this channel, because they offer a valuable service where you can sign up with them and they will require all of these data brokers that sell on your data to other parties to remove your data from their servers. Because what very often happens is, and we've had many clients come to us, is that when your data is sold on to third parties, eventually it can end up in the wrong hands via the dark web, which is where people buy and sell information about people like you that have been packaged together, and then they go out and take out loans and contracts and they buy things in your name, and then the companies come after you for the money. All of which might have started very genuinely with you working with a company, giving all your information to them, and within a few days you might then realize you've got marketing calls coming through and they all seem to pop up at the same time when you've done a quick search for, let's say, an insurance product or some other kind of product. Now, many of them have these little checkboxes where you say, you're allowed to use this data for marketing purposes and share it with trusted third parties. That's where they sell it on to another trusted third party, but those third parties may not be as trustworthy as you at first thought. So your data, your whole package of information about you with which someone could use to take out a loan, might end up in the hands of a data broker and they sell it on to everybody. And then eventually your data can end up on the dark web, and then you're in trouble. Incogni is a fantastic service that helps to stop this from happening right at the outset by requiring all of these data brokers and various companies to remove your data from their systems, both under UK law, which is UK GDPR, and the law in the United States. These companies will be required to remove your data from their servers in accordance with data protection law, and you get a dashboard and email updates as to how many companies have complied and removed your data from their servers. It takes some time, and the Incogni team have to be persistent, but eventually they do remove it from their system and you are that little bit safer. Of course, I've got you an exclusive discount in the description below. You can see my unique page with my own profile on their website, and you can get an exclusive 60% discount off an annual plan with Incogni using the code BlackBeltBarrister in the description below. And I will reiterate to you again that I would never recommend something on this channel that I wouldn't use myself. I have used Incogni myself and I've seen the results. I've seen dozens of companies removing my data from their servers, significantly reducing the likelihood of my personal data ending up in the hands of third parties, thus protecting me from risk. So once more, the link is on screen and in the description below. Grab yourself a 60% discount off an annual plan. You will thank me later for the peace of mind knowing that you're that little bit safer. So thank you for listening and allowing me to present my partner for this video. So back to the phone call, and this bit is really interesting because they told us that this particular phone call included an internal conversation and therefore had to be transcribed before they sent it to us. They didn't say anything about redacting any portion of it, and they also said that it was automatic. They said that it was an automatic transcription, so there might be errors and spelling errors and things like that, but once that was done, automatically, they would send it to us. That's not quite what they did. What they did was they obviously manually went through this transcript and redacted all of the internal conversation, which quite clearly discussed our policy and hinted that they were going to pay out, albeit they didn't later. So I would be extremely interested, both individually because it's cost us over £40,000 so far, and as a lawyer because they've redacted a portion of a phone call whereby they are talking about us and our policy, which is in breach of GDPR because they should be disclosing that to us because they are discussing us and our policy, and it's inseparable from us as data subjects, so they can't really redact it and withhold it. I believe, and this is my personal opinion, even though I'm not naming the company just yet at least, I firmly believe that that redacted portion of the phone call is in our favor. I think it says something along the lines of, well, this is obviously a mistake, we should be covering the claim. That's what I think it says. Or perhaps that they'd admitted that they should have checked it and didn't check it and had a duty of care and have failed in that duty of care because we've had this policy going on for years now. All of which suggests to me that there is something to hide. And quite literally, they've hidden it. They've redacted this internal portion of the phone call, which I think is in my favor. So I will be very interested to come back and report to you whether or not they unredact it, what happens next, because if they don't unredact it and send us that portion of the phone call, I will be making a complaint to the ICO because that is the next route. And this is the reason for the video, because if you are in that situation and you know that you said something to the insurance company and you know or you believe that they are withholding some information that might be favorable to you, which is disclosable under GDPR, their standard response might be, no, you're not having it. Their standard response might be, this is just a business conversation. We're not going to disclose this to you, even though it's in your favor, even though it's about you and your policy. So this is to guide you, to push to get this data released. And if not, make a complaint to the ICO. And hopefully the ICO will stand up and say, well, this is clearly personal data. You need to disclose it. And if they don't, then I'll hop over to court and make an application for disclosure there, because I firmly believe that if they are discussing us and our policy on that redacted portion of the phone call, which is sort of 2 or 3 minutes and 20 or 30 lines worth of text, they ought to be disclosing that because it's about us. It's not just about their business decisions. It's business decisions as to how they affect our policy and us as individuals. So that, in my view, is disclosable. And that is why this is not yet a completed story, but I wanted to share a bit of it with you because I found that refusal particularly interesting. First of all, they said they couldn't find the transcripts of the web chats, and then suddenly they did when I pointed out that their complaints team relied on them to reject the claim. And even though bits of it are in our favor, maybe they haven't read it so thoroughly, but they do back up exactly what I've said, because clearly they can't redact bits that we've said to the insurance company that are in our favor because they back up what we said we were doing at the time with the insurance policy. They obviously can't redact those. They've chosen to redact the internal conversations where we firmly believe it's in our favor. But we'll find out at some point. And then this will become part of a full story, and when I get the final conclusion, the final resolution, then I'll tell you who it is, because then it's only fair. Because at the moment, I am giving them another opportunity to put things right, and it's only fair that we do that before we name them prematurely. So I hope you found that interesting. If you feel that you are being quote-unquote screwed, I use the term because it applies personally to us. I wouldn't use the term otherwise. But if you feel that that's happening to you, remember that you can request your data from the insurance company or whichever company you're having the dispute with. And remember, if you want to remove your data from other companies and from selling it onto third-party marketing companies, don't forget to check out Incogni with the link in the description below with a 60% off an annual plan. So thank you for listening. Please do make sure you subscribe and like the video because that helps my channel grow. And I plan to expose the truth about as many companies as possible on this channel. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.